Well, hello everybody, and welcome to our event today. I am not Jason Rader. I am Juan Orlandini. Jason Rader, our regular host, is under the weather, so we wish him speedy recovery. And I will attempt to guide this conversation as much as I can. And with me is Stephen Walters and Brandon Lemke, and we're going to cover X as a service. So let me start it off by actually asking both of these august gentlemen to first introduce themselves and then go into, X as a service has been around for a long time, and we've been hearing about it for a while. But why is it that it's so prevalent in the news and that our customers are engaging with us so much? So why don't we start with Stephen, introduce yourself, and then maybe cover that question.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Juan. So Stephen Walters. I am part of Insight's managed services organization and have responsibility for our portfolio and architecture teams. So it's a great question, Juan. I can tell you, these programs that have offered subscription-like services have really been around for quite a while. I think that we have seen just an unbelievable acceleration across really all the OEMs. Really, I would say in the past 18 months for sure. The past 12 months have been just off the charts with activity around it. It's interesting if you look at it from the OEM perspective, but if you shift your perspective to the clients, what we're seeing is the clients are starting to ask for it. Whereas in the past, you really were in there contrasting these models with CapEx expenditures. It was really just kind of a lightweight, kind of different way to buy the same thing that I bought in the past. And what I'm seeing is the clients are not only asking for these models, but it's the services that go along with it that they're also interested in. And I think that's a real shift in the market. And what it tells me is that they're not just looking to buy the same old thing, the same in a different way. They're really looking for something that's somewhat transformational for their organization.
So, Brandon, what's your take on that? And introduce yourself for the audience, please.
Happy to do so. Like Stephen, Brandon Lemke, I represent our delivery organization for managed services. And as Stephen said and indicated here, that a lot of our clients are looking for more of an outcome-based solution, and really are focusing on how do they take the legacy way of buying CapEx and then figuring out how they're going to run it and operate it and manage it, to then converting that to more of just a solution, right? A service that they are now able to consume not only the hardware, the software, but all the services to deliver that solution. And so we start thinking about things like 24/7 monitoring and management of the infrastructure, and ensuring that the service is running 24/7 for our client. Now they can take their teams and kind of move them into other responsibilities and getting that off their plate. So it really is, it's almost taken that cloud experience that a lot of our clients are getting, right, when they're in the public cloud space. And now they're able to apply that to a on-prem solution, right? So that could be in your data center, in a colo. It's even applicable to the network. We have a lot of our clients that are now taking advantage of these X as a service programs where they're able to deploy an entire network, whether it's a one-time deployment or over the course of several months or maybe even a year, when they're doing these technology refreshes. And they're just moving that entire model to now it's network as a service, right? And so they get all the aspects of that environment delivered to them as an outcome and as a service.
Well, what's interesting about what you said, Brandon, is you covered network and data center, but there's a lot that goes into those. And there's not just a network and the data center. There's devices and lots of other things that are being proposed to be consumed as a service. So can you touch on that and the variety of choices that are available for this kind of a service?
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, Juan, there are so many today, and they're continuing to grow. I think that's one of the things that we've had to do a lot of learning, and this is both ourselves as well as with our partners on how do you take all of these different partner solutions, and really make it as seamless as we can for the client, right? And so you mentioned there's things in the data center, right? You've got your compute, you've got your storage, you've got your network in the data center. You also, you're starting to see a lot of the software partners also being involved in these solutions, right? And so being able to pull all of that together, either at the beginning of an opportunity, because we may be doing a whole refresh for a client, or we're applying the model for a client, and we may be only refreshing certain aspects of their environment, but we're going to continue to add other things in as they need to do either a technology upgrade or a technology refresh. So even just the data center itself can get pretty complex with the number of partners and things that clients are looking to leverage from an OEM perspective. And then, yeah, you mentioned device as a service, right? That one is a very, very large one, because there are things that are in that model that revolve around end user experience, right? In those, and so that's a whole different area where you're having to provide the device and maybe a lot of the peripheral devices that go with it, and you're trying to provide all of the management of that device, the life cycle of that device, the asset, all that kind of stuff. And so, and a lot of our clients are looking globally for these as well. And so that in itself adds another layer of complexity that we are getting to figure out and helping to deliver. So yeah, it's pretty cool seeing all the different areas that are coming into play with the as a service model.
So what you said actually sounds to me super complicated, all right? Because there's all of these different partners that are involved in OEMs and probably different models associated with each one of the OEMs. So Stephen, is that something that you run into a lot when we're helping our clients consume like a whole data center's worth of as a service or whatever that is, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple of relative examples there. In the data center, you could imagine that, a storage array in and of itself is not a solution. A stack of blade servers in and of themselves is not a solution. And the network likewise. So you have multiple pieces of technology, and sometimes we see multiple OEMs that make up the ultimate solution. It's a mixture of different OEMs and service offerings that kind of get put together to provide that outcome. Well, when you do that, being able to take all of the multiple, we'll say, agreements that have to be signed, and all these the terms and conditions, the start dates, how those OEMs actually lay those things out is vastly different between them, and it changes all the time. That's one of the things we see. There's an enormous change in these programs. As you can imagine, they are somewhat on the cutting edge of how these OEMs are doing business, transacting business, and so they're constantly being updated. So having a partner that's able to take the multiple lines and really have the right relationships to ensure that you get out of the gate right. That it's important that you have alignment on, well, when did everything arrive at the dock, and how is it being implemented, and when are the contracts going to start, and how you manage the length of those contracts and the refresh cycle. It's a layer of complexity that the right partner is able to sort of mask that complexity and just provide the solution down to things like consolidated invoices. It sounds simple on the surface. It's definitely complex on the back end. I think potentially, Brandon, you hit on one that I would like to maybe highlight again, and that is if you take device as a service, in that space, it's much more than just say, take a laptop, something very, very simple. It's not that I want a laptop for X dollars a month or X dollars a month, right? I mean, that's a lease per se. You can do that. It's really all the other stuff that goes around with it. It's modern management of the laptop. It's the desktop experience capabilities. It's the break fix aspects of it. It's the retrieval sustainability at the end of the cycle. It's all of those things, warehousing, you name it. There's a list. It's the ability to put all of that together into an offering that really offers a true as a service, right? It's not just the piece of equipment.
So, Stephen, what you touched on is how we would deliver this for a client. But I would imagine that there's also a transformation that clients have to undergo themselves and how they operate this equipment, regardless of what equipment you're getting, whether it's data center, cloud, any of those things, so that they can meter appropriately, forecast appropriately, report appropriately, all of those things. What have you guys seen? And this is a question for both. As best practices for clients that are embarking on an X as a service journey to optimize all of that consumption and all that, to really gain the advantage of this flexibility that comes from these programs?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll kind of start it, and Stephen, you can chime in. So I think the big word is obviously scalability on that and flexibility, right? The big concepts around why clients are going to this. So it's adjusting the mindset of I've got to go buy something, I've got to capitalize it over a certain period of time. I may even have to buy for a projected growth, right? I got to buy now because I got to plan on all the capacity that I'm going to need for the next 3 years, because maybe I can't go buy any additional capacity for 3 years, because that was a traditional model that a lot of people operated under, right? And so now you had to get in this predictive mode of what am I going to need in 6 months and 12 months and. And so with these models, and especially what we've been able to really bring together, and as Stephen talked about previously, align with all our different partners and OEMs, is the ability to provide the service and the solution for what the client currently needs, right? And it's going to meet the performance that they need. It's going to meet the capacities that they need, and then give them an extra buffer of, we call it burst or additional, right? And not have to pay for it. And so if you can imagine the niceness of, hey, I've got something available to me that I'm not having to pay for, right? So now you've just proven that you're in a better situation than the CapEx model where you have all that capacity, but you paid for it. So now, that's one of the big ones is just being able to have some extra room in your environment to leverage when you need it, and obviously grow into it, right? And so the other great thing about these is you're basically you have call it a rate card for the services that you're getting. And so now predictively, if I start to need more, I've already got it on hand, and I know how much more I'm going to pay per month to start utilizing that, right? And as I start utilizing that, Insight, we're watching the capacity with you, and we're talking to you about what your growth is looking like. And then on the back end, we're also working with the OEMs to now extend that capacity, right? So if we know you're going to need capacity for a short time, maybe you're a seasonal company and you've got a requirement for more burst or more capacity needs during a certain time of year, you can leverage it, pay for what you use, and then you can pull it back, right? And so we do have a lot of clients that are leveraging the extra capacity for standing up some environments to do some testing, do the things that they want to do. And again, you get this flexibility in the cloud, right? And then you tear it down when you're done. Well, that's what you get here as well. And as I said, now you're in this predictable model to where, if I continue on this trajectory of continued additional use, now we can add more capacity to keep that buffer for you, so you have something for the future needs, right? So, Stephen, I don't know if you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the storage example is just the easiest and most impactful in terms of providing that buffer and flexibility. And anyone who's ever been in the data center management space has had a storage array that filled up. And once it fills up, you got to add more storage or you got to take something out, right? And so the process to get a quote, get the budget, get it approved, get it ordered, get it shipped, somebody to install it, like this is weeks and weeks, right? It's not something that happens overnight. So being able to have capacity on hand that you can burst into and that is managed just in a different way, to me is just, it's a monumental change in how these services are going to be consumed in the future, for sure.
So I'm going to rewind the conversation to the very beginning. And Stephen, you said something at the intro about how originally it was mostly the OEMs that were talking to us about these programs. And what we've seen is that now clients are approaching this directly rather than through an OEM or one of those things. What do you think made that transformation? What was the inflection point that flipped the conversation from an OEM-led conversation to a client-led conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are multiple factors. I mean, the financial strains are definitely one of them. The ability to turn it into, a subscription-based service, it just fundamentally changes the conversation of, do I need X million of dollars to go buy the thing, or do I need just a monthly subscription at a certain rate? I think that's a huge driver. The other that I'm seeing that is actually very, I think, interesting in the sense that I talk to OEMs about this, that there's features that are available on any platform. Let's say I have 100, you sit in the sales pitch and you say, oh, it can do this, it can do that, it can, that's great, that's the sales pitch. And then, it shows up on the dock, you install it, and it's like, how do I take advantage of this? They promised me this governance capability in the platform. I don't know how to implement it. What I'm seeing is clients are showing an interest in having the provider really be the driver for the adoption of the capabilities of the platform. And does that mean that you adopt 100% of the features? No, but it means that you have a provider that can put a real process around these features so that they are made available, that they are used on a regular basis, that they're actually relevant to the client. Some features may or may not be. It could even be industry specific, right? Maybe there's some compliance features that are really interesting to an industry that is regulated, let's say. So I'm starting to see that the as a service model is really the vehicle to drive adoption of really the features that are being rolled out by the OEMs. I think in the past, so many of those features just sat on the shelf and weren't used.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll add some other things that I think are starting to drive it from the client perspective is X as a service. Like you said, Juan, these programs have been around a long time, right? But I do think, as Stephen said, the financial strain that a lot of companies have gone through. But I think companies are also starting to recognize use cases for these that they really weren't really thinking about before. And simple example, but one that we've seen quite often is a client doesn't know what their call it long-term plan is for an environment if they're in a colo today, or maybe they've got a lot of data centers and they're going to do some consolidation, but now they're also running into this tech debt. And versus, going out and buying a bunch of stuff for a specific data center, which they know they're going to be moving, but maybe that infrastructure is going end of life, right? So there are these use cases that I think now are starting to really be identified at the client level, where they're going, we're doing things, right? We're either moving to the cloud, or we're, like I said, consolidating data centers, moving, whatever. And now with these programs, because again, the way they're modeled, you can do shorter term subscriptions, right? That's the flexibility of these. And so with the ability to now not have this long-term commitment of buying all the hardware and having to do all that and then figure out how do I move it, right? Now I can rent, and get the subscription and the service for a shorter time period while I'm doing all the things that I need to do, and so that has been a real game changer for a handful of our clients, where they came to us and said, "Oh yeah, we know we want to do cloud migrations, and we want to do modernization. We just you always want to go. You always say you're going to go faster than you really go, right?" And a lot of people are recognizing that. So having these subscription options has really helped them in making a lot of the tough decisions on how fast do they have to go versus, okay, we got some time, we can do other things, right?
So this is a very rich and deep subject, right? We could dig into just any one specific vertical for a very long time. And so we've covered this at a very high level. So at that level, is there any other words of wisdom that you gentlemen would love to share with the audience on how to get started, or if they've started, how to rationalize it better, or anything along those lines that you'd like to share with clients? And I'll start with you, Brandon, and then go over to Stephen.
I don't have any great words of wisdom other than, I think it is engaging. Obviously, love for you to call us. A lot of partners there are a lot of companies out there that are doing this. I think the biggest one that we see is looking for the internal reasons as to shifting from a mindset of owning something and I own it and I got to run it and kind of the legacy way of doing things, and then start shifting that mindset to more of the consumption based outcome, right? And that's really where the pivot has to happen, because if we're doing just straight compares of buying something versus renting or leasing, or even subscription, a lot of times it's not a fair comparison, right? And so you really got to start thinking about the other value add of these models in order for people to really start making that pivot towards this type of X as a service model program.
Stephen, over to you. Any words of wisdom?
Yeah, I do. So, in the CapEx transactional model, it matters more that you get it at the cheapest price than who you choose to buy it from, right? That whoever you buy it from, it's a piece of paper flowing through. It gets shipped from a warehouse. You get it. You got a good price, good for you, and you move on. In the as a service model, it absolutely matters who your partner is. And the reason that it matters is that the vast majority of these programs are built on the requirement that the partner provides services that go above and beyond whatever the product is. So this is not a one and done type of transaction. This is a relationship with your partner here. So when you start to think about things like first call technical support, you start to think about things like managed services, implementation, who are you going to meet with on a, say, quarterly basis to review your capacity planning and things of that nature. These are partner-led services for the vast majority of the OEMs out there that have these programs. So it really matters who you're working with for these programs, for sure.
Well, that's great. Those are great words of wisdom. And with that, we're at time. Time flies when we're having great conversations. I really appreciate Stephen and Brandon, both of you joining us today. And for the audience, if you'd like to find out more, please come visit us at www.insight.com. We have a wealth of information that's available from there across all of the different modalities that X as a service is offered, everything from devices to the data center, cloud, the software stacks, and all of the things in between. And with that, thank you. And again, wishing Jason Rader a speedy recovery. Thank you all.
Thank you.